By a demoniacal art, a junior uncle and an elder brother's wife, Pao Yi and Lady Feng, come across 5 devils. The gem of spiritual perception meets, in a fit of torpor, the 2 perfect men. Xiao Heng, the story continues, was much unsettled in her mind. Her thoughts rolled on in one connected string. But suddenly, she became drowsy, and, falling asleep, she encountered Gea Yen, who tried to carry out his intention to drag her near him. She twisted herself round and endeavored to run away, but was tripped over by the doorstep. This gave her such a start that she woke up. Then, at length, she realized that it was only a dream. But so restlessly did she, in consequence of this fright, keep on rolling and tossing that she could not close her eyes during the whole night. As soon as the light of the next day dawned, she got up. Several waiting maids came at once to tell her to go and sweep the floor of the rooms and to bring water to wash the face with. Xiao Heng didn't even wait to arrange her hair or perform her ablutions, but turning towards the looking-glass, she pinned her chevalier up anyhow, and rinsing her hands and tying a sash around her waist, she repaired directly to sweep the apartments. Who would have thought it? Pao Yi also had set his heart on her the moment he caught sight of her the previous day. Yet, he feared in the first place that if he mentioned her name and called her over into his service, Si Ren and the other girls might feel the pangs of jealousy. He did not, either, in the second place, have any idea what her disposition was like. The consequence was that he felt downcast, so much so that when he got up at an early hour, he did not even comb his hair or wash, but simply remained seated and brooded in a state of abstraction. After a while, he lowered the window. Through the gauze frame from which he could distinctly discern what was going on outside, he espied several servant girls engaged in sweeping the court. All of them were rouged and powdered. They had flowers inserted in their hair and were grandly got up. But the only one of whom he failed to get a glimpse was the girl he had met the day before. Pao Yi speedily walked out of the door with slipshod shoes. Under the pretense of admiring the flowers, he glanced now towards the east, now towards the west. But upon raising his head, he descried, in the southwest corner, someone or other leaning by the side of the railing under the covered passage. A crab-apple tree, however, obstructed the view, and he could not see distinctly who it was. So, advancing a step further in, he stared with intent gaze. It was, in fact, the waiting maid of the day before, tarrying about plunged in a reverie. His wish was to go forward and meet her, but he did not, on the other hand, see how he could very well do so. Just as he was cogitating within himself, he of a sudden perceived Bai Heng come and ask him to go and wash his face. This reminder placed him under the necessity of betaking himself into his room. But we will leave him there without further details so as to return to Xiao Heng. She was communing with her own thoughts, but unawares, perceiving Si Ren wave her hand and call her by name, she had to walk up to her. "Our watering pot is spoiled," Si Ren smiled and said, "so go to Miss Lin's over there and find one for us to use." Xiao Heng hurried on her way towards the Xiao Hong Quan. When she got as far as the Tsui Wiren Bridge, she saw, on raising her head and looking around, the mounds and lofty places entirely shut in by screens, and she bethought herself that laborers were that day to plant trees in that particular locality. At a great distance off, a band of men were indeed engaged in digging up the soil, while Sao Hen was seated on a boulder on the hill, superintending the works. The time came for her to pass by, but she could not muster the courage to do so. Nevertheless, she had no other course but to proceed quietly to Xiao Hongquen. Then, getting the watering pot, she sped on her way again. But, being in low spirits, she retired alone into her room and lay herself down. One and all simply maintained that she was out of sorts, so they did not pay any heed to her. A day went by. On the morrow fell, in fact, the anniversary of the birth of Wang Zhu-Tang's wife, and someone was sent from his residence to come and invite Dowager Lady Jia and Madame Wang. Madame Wang found out, however, that Dowager Lady Jia would not avail herself of the invitation, and neither would she go. So Mrs. He went along with Lady Feng and the three sisters of the Gaya family, and Pao Sheng and Pao Yi, and only returned home late in the evening. Madame Wang was sitting in Mrs. Hu's apartments, whither she had just crossed, when she perceived Gaya Huan come back from school, and she bade him transcribe incantations out of the Qinggang canon and intonate them. Gaya Huan accordingly came and sat himself on the stove coach occupied by Madame Wang, and directing a servant to light the candles, he started copying in an ostentatious and dashing manner. Now he called for Xian Zia to pour a cup of tea for him. Now he asked for Yu Quan to take the scissors and cut the snuff of the wick. "Qin Chuan, you're in the way of the rays of the lamp," he cried. The servant girls had all along entertained an antipathy for him, so none of them troubled her mind about what he said. Kaizia was the only one who still got on well with him, so pouring a cup of tea, she handed it to him. But she felt prompted to whisper to him, "Keep quiet a bit. What's the use of making people dislike you?" "I know myself how matters stand," Jiawan rejoined, as he cast a steady glance at her. "So don't you try and befool me. Now that you are on intimate terms with Pao Yu, you don't pay much heed to me. I've also seen through it myself." Sai Sao set her teeth together and gave him a fillip on the head. "You heartless fellow," she cried, "you're like the dog that bit Lu Tung Pin. You have no idea of what's right and what's wrong." While these two nagged away, they noticed Lady Feng and Madame Wang cross together over to them. Madame Wang at once assailed him with questions. She asked him how many ladies had been present on that day, whether the play had been good or bad, and what the banquet had been like. But a brief interval over, Pao Yu too appeared on the scene. After saluting Madame Wang, he also made a few remarks with all decorum, and then bidding a servant to remove his frontlet, divest him of his long gown, and pull off his boots, he rushed head forwards into his mother's lap. Madame Wang caressed and patted him. But while Pao Yu clung to his mother's neck, he spoke to her of one thing and then another. "My child," said Madame Wang, "you've again had too much to drink. Your face is scalding hot, and if you still keep on rubbing and scraping it, why, you'll by and by stir up the fumes of wine. Don't you yet go and lie down quietly over there for a little?" Chiding him the while, she directed a servant to fetch a pillow. Therefore, Pao Yu lay himself down at the back of Madame Wang and called Sai Sao to come and stroke him. Pao Yu then began to bandy words with Sai Sao. But Perceiving that Sai Sao was reserved and that instead of paying him any attention, she kept her eyes fixed upon Jiawan, Pao Yu eagerly took her hand. "My dear girl," he said, "do also heed me a little." And as he gave utterance to this appeal, he kept her hand clasped in his. Sai Sao, however, drew her hand away and would not let him hold it. "If you go on this way," she vehemently exclaimed, "I'll shout out at once." These two were in the act of wrangling when verily Jiawan heard what was going on. He had, in fact, all along hated Pao Yu. So when on this occasion he espied him up to his larks with Sai Sao, he could much less than ever before stifle feelings of resentment in his heart. After some reflection, therefore, an idea suggested itself to his mind, and pretending that it was by a slip of hand, he shoved the candle, overflowing with tallow, into Pao Yu's face. "Ah-ya!" Pao Yu was heard to explain. Everyone in the whole room was plunged in consternation. With precipitant haste, the lanterns standing on the floor were moved over. And with the first ray of light, they discovered that Pao Yu's face was one mass of tallow. Madame Wang gave way to anger as well as anxiety. At one time, she issued directions to the servants to rub and wash Pao Yu clean. At another, she heaped abuse at Jiawan. Lady Feng jumped onto the stone couch by leaps and bounds. But while intent on removing the stuff from Pao Yu's face, she simultaneously ejaculated, "Master Tortoise, are you still such a trickster? I'll tell you, you'll never turn to any good account. Yet Dame Sao should ever correct and admonish him." This single remark suggested the idea to Madame Wang, and she lost no time in sending for Mrs. Sao to come round. "You bring up such a black-hearted offspring like this, and don't you after all advise and reprove him? Time and again I paid no notice whatever to what happened, and you and he have become more audacious and have gone from worse to worse." Mrs. Sao had no alternative but to suppress every sense of injury, silence all grumblings, and go herself and lend a hand to the others in tidying Pao Yu. She then perceived that a whole row of blisters had arisen on the left side of Pao Yu's face. But, fortunately, no injury had been done to his eyes. When Madame Wang's attention was drawn to them, she felt her heart soar. It fell a prey to fears also, lest when Dowager Lady Jia made any inquiries about them, she should find it difficult to give her any satisfactory answer. And so distressed she got that she gave Mrs. Sao another scolding. But while she tried to comfort Pao Yu, she at the same time fetched some powder for counteracting the effects of the virus and applied it on his face. "It's rather sore," Pao Yu said, "but it's nothing to speak of. If I look after it for a day or two, it'll get all right." "If you say that you scalded it yourself," Lady Feng observed, "why, she'll also call people to task for not looking out. And a fit of rage will be beyond doubt the outcome of it all." Madame Wang then ordered the servants to take care and escort Pao Yu back to his room. On their arrival, Si Yin and his other attendants saw him, and they were all in a great state of flurry. As for Lin Taiyu, when she found that Pao Yu had gone out of doors, she continued the whole day a prey to ennui. In the evening, she deputed messengers 2 and 3 times to go and inquire about him. But when she came to know that he had been scalded, she hurried in person to come and see him. She then discovered the Pao Yu all alone, holding a glass and scanning his faces in it, while the left side of his face was plastered all over with some medicine. Lin Taiyu imagined that the burn was of extremely serious nature, and she hastened to approach him with a view to examine it. Pao Yu, however, screened his face and waved his hand, bade her leave the room, for he knew her usual knack for tidiness. He did not feel inclined to let her get a glimpse of his face. Yu then gave up the attempt and confined herself to asking him whether it was very painful. "It isn't very sore," replied Pao Yu. "If I look after it for a day or two, it'll get all right." The next day, Pao Yu saw Dowager Lady Chia, but in spite of his confession that he himself was responsible for the scalding of his face, his grandmother could not refrain from reading another lecture to the servants who had been in attendance. A day after, Ma, a Taoist matron whose name was recorded as Pao Yu's godmother, came on a visit to the mansion. Upon perceiving Pao Yu, she was very much taken aback and asked all about the circumstances of the accident. When he explained that he had been scalded, she forthwith shook her head and heaved a sigh. Then, while making with her fingers a few passes over Pao Yu's face, she went on to mutter incantations for several minutes. "I can guarantee that he'll get all right, for this is simply a sudden and fleeting accident." Turning towards Dowager Lady Chia, "Venerable ancestor, venerable Buddha, how could you ever be aware of the existence of that portentous passage in that Buddhistic classic to the effect that a son of every person who holds the dignity of prince, duke, or high functionary has no sooner come into the world and reached a certain age than numerous evil spirits at once secretly haunt him and pinch him when they find an opportunity, or knock his nails into him, or knock his bowl of rice down during mealtimes, or give him a shove and send him over while he is quietly seated? So this is the reason why the majority of the sons and grandsons of those distinguished families do not grow up to attain manhood." Dowager Lady Chia, upon hearing her speak in this wise, eagerly asked, "Is there any Buddhistic spell by which to check their influence or not?" "This is an easy job," rejoined the Taoist matron Ma. "All one need do is to perform several meritorious deeds on his account so as to counteract the consequences of retribution, and everything will then be put right." That canon further explains that in the western part of the world there is a mighty Buddha whose glory illumines all things, and whose special charge is to cast his luster on the evil spirits in dark places. That if any benevolent man or virtuous woman offers him oblations with sincerity of heart, he is able to successfully perpetuate the peace and quiet of their sons and grandsons, that these will no more meet with any calamities arising from being possessed by malevolent demons. "But what, I wonder," inquired Dowager Lady Chia, "could be offered to this god?" "Nothing of any great value, exclusive of offerings of scented candles. Several caddies of scented oil can be added each day to keep the lantern of the Great Sea alight. This Great Sea lantern is the visible embodiment and Buddhistic representation of this divinity, so day and night we don't venture to let it go out." "For a whole day and a whole night?" asked Dowager Lady Chia. "How much oil is needed so that I too should accomplish a good action?" "There is really no limit as to quantity. It rests upon the goodwill of the donor," Ma, the Taoist matron, put in by way of reply. "In my quarters, for instance, I have several lanterns, the gifts of the consorts of princes and the spouses of high officials living in various localities. The consort of the mansion of the Prince of Nanao has been prompted in her beneficence by a liberal spirit. she allows each day 48 caddies of oil and a caddy of wick, so that her great sea lampturn is only a trifle smaller than a water jar. The spouse of the Marquis of Qinxiang comes next with no more than 20 caddies a day. Besides these, there are several other families, some giving 10 caddies, some giving 8, some 3, some 5, subject to no fixed role, and of course I feel bound to keep the lanterns alight on their behalf. Dowager Lady Chia nodded her head and gave way to reflection. There's another thing, continued the Taoist matron Ma. If it be on account of father or mother or seniors, any excessive donation would not matter. But were you, venerable ancestor, to bestow too much in your offering for Pao Yu, our young master won't be able to equal the gift, and instead of being benefited, his happiness will be snapped. So, if you therefore want to make a liberal gift, 7 caddies will do. If a small one, then 5 caddies will even be sufficient. Well, in that case, responded Dowager Lady Chia, let us fix upon 5 caddies a day, and every month come and receive payment of the whole lump sum. O mi tofu, exclaimed Ma, the Taoist matron. O merciful and mighty Pusa! Dowager Lady Chia then called the servants and impressed on their minds that whenever Pao Yu went outdoors in the future, they should give several strings of cash to the pages to bestow on charity among the bonzes and Taoist priests and the poor and needy they might meet on the way. These directions concluded, the Taoist matron trudged into various quarters and paid her respects and then strolled leisurely about. Presently, she entered Mrs. Zhao's apartments. After the 2 ladies had exchanged salutations, Mrs. Zhao bade a young servant girl hand her guest a cup of tea. While Mrs. Zhao busied herself pasting shoes, Ma, the Taoist matron, espied piled up in a heap on the stove couch sundry pieces of silks and satins. So she consequently remarked, "It just happens that I have no facings for shoes, so, my lady, do give me a few odd cuttings of silk and satin of no matter what color to make myself a pair of shoes with."
Mrs. Chow heaved a sigh. "Look," she said, "whether there be still among them any pieces good for anything. But anything that's worth anything doesn't find its way in here. If you don't despise what's worthless, you're at liberty to select any 2 pieces and to take them away and have done." The Taoist matron Ma chose with alacrity several pieces and shoved them in her breast. "The other day," Mrs. Chow went on to inquire, "I sent a servant over with 500 cash. Have you presented any offerings before the god of medicine or not?" "I've offered them long ago for you," the Taoist matron Ma rejoined. "Oh, mi tofu!" ejaculated Mrs. Chow with a sigh. "Were I a little better off, I'd also come often and offer gifts. But though my will be boundless, my means are insufficient." "Don't trouble your mind on this score," suggested Ma, the Taoist matron. "By and by, when Mr. Huan has grown up into a man and obtained some official post or other, will there be then any fear of your not being able to afford such offerings as you might like to make?" At these words, Mrs. Chow gave a smile. "Enough, enough," she cried. "Don't again refer to such contingencies. The present is a fair criterion, for up to whom in this house can my son and I come? Pao Yu is still a mere child, but he is such that he wins people's love. Those big people may be partial to him and love him a good deal. I've nothing to say to it, but I can't eat humble pie to this sort of mistress." While uttering this remark, she stretched out her 2 fingers. Ma, the Taoist matron, understood the meaning she desired to convey. it's your lady's secunda lien, eh? She forthwith asked. Mrs. Chow was filled with trepidation. Hastily waving her hand, she got to her feet, raised the portiere, and peeped outside. Perceiving that there was no one about, at length she retraced her footsteps. Dreadful, dreadful. But speaking of this sort of mistress, I'm not so much as a human being if she doesn't manage to shift over into her mother's home the whole of this estate. Need you tell me this? Ma the Taoist matron at these words remarked, with a view to ascertain what she implied. Haven't I, forsooth, discovered it all for myself? Yet it's fortunate that you don't trouble your minds about her, for it's far better that you should let her have her own way. My dear woman, not let her have her own way? Why, is it likely that anyone would have the courage to tell her anything? I don't mean to utter any words that may bring upon me retribution, added Ma, the Taoist matron, but you people haven't got the wits. But it's no matter of surprise. Yet if you daren't openly do anything, why, you could stealthily have devised a plan, and do you still tarry up to this day? Mrs. Chow realized that there lurked something in her insinuation, and she felt an inward secret joy. What plan could I stealthily devise? I've got the will right enough, but I'm not a person gifted with this sort of gumption. So were you to impart me some way or another, I'd reward you most liberally. When the Taoist matron Ma heard this, she drew near to her. Oh, me tofu, desist at once from asking me, she designedly exclaimed. How can I know anything about such matters, contrary as they are to what is right? There you are again. You're one ever most ready to succor those in distress and to help those in danger. And is it likely that you will quietly look on while someone comes and compasses my death as well as that of my son? Are you, pray, fearful lest I shouldn't give you any reward? The Taoist matron Ma greeted this remark with a smile. You're right enough in what you say of my being unable to bear the sight of yourself and son receiving insult from a third party, but as for your mention of rewards, why, what's there of yours that I still covet? This answer slightly reassured Mrs. Chow's mind. How is it that an intelligent person like you has become so dense? If indeed the spell prove efficacious, and we exterminate them both, is there any apprehension that this family estate won't be ours? And when that time comes, won't you get all you may wish? At this disclosure, Ma, the Taoist matron, lowered her head for a long time. When everything shall be settled satisfactorily, and when there will be, what's more, no proof at all, will you still pay any heed to me? What's there hard about this? Remarked Mrs. Chow. I've saved several taels from my own pin money, and have besides a good number of clothes and head ornaments. So you can first take several of these away with you, and I'll also write an IOU and entrust it to you, and when that time comes, I'll pay you in full. That will do, answered Ma. Mrs. Chow thereupon dismissed even a young servant girl who happened to be in the room, and hastily opening a trunk, she produced several articles of clothing and jewelry, as well as a few odd pieces of silver from her own pocket money. Then also writing a promissory note of 50 taels, she surrendered the lot to Ma, the Taoist matron. She said, Take these in advance for presents in your temple.
At the sight of the various articles and of the promissory note, the Taoist matron became at once unmindful of what was right and what was wrong. And while her mouth was full of assent, she stretched out her arm and first and foremost laid hold of the hard cash, and next clutched the IOU. Turning then towards Mrs. Chow, she asked for a sheet of paper, and taking up a pair of scissors, she cut out 2 human beings and gave them to Mrs. Chow, enjoining her to write on the upper part of them the respective ages of the 2 persons in question. Looking further for a sheet of blue paper, she cut out 5 blue-faced devils, which she bade her place together side by side with the paper men. And taking a pin, she made them fast. When I get home, she remarked, I'll have recourse to some art which will beyond doubt prove efficacious. When she, however, had done speaking, she suddenly saw Madame Wang's waiting maid make her appearance inside the room. "What, my dame, are you in here? Why, our lady is waiting for you." The two dames then parted company. But passing them over, we will now allude to Lin Tai-yu. As Pao Yu had scalded his face and did not go out of doors very much, she often came to have a chat with him. On this particular day, she took up, after her meal, some book or other and read a couple of pages out of it. Next, she busied herself a little with needlework in company with Zi Zhuang. She felt, however, thoroughly dejected and out of sorts, so she strolled outdoors along with her. But catching sight of the newly sprouted bamboo shoots in front of the pavilion, they uneventually stepped out of the entrance of the court and penetrated into the garden. They cast their eyes on all four quadrants, but not a soul was visible. When they became conscious of the splendor of the flowers and the chatter of the birds, they with listless step turned their course towards the Yihong court. There they found several servant girls bailing out water, while a bevy of them stood under the veranda watching the thrushes having their bath. They also heard the sound of laughter in the rooms. The fact is that Li Kung Chai, Lady Fong, and Pao Chai were assembled inside. As soon as they saw them walk in, they with one voice shouted, smiling, "Now, are not these two more?" "We are a full company today," laughed Tai Yu. "But who has issued the cards and invited us here?" "The other day," interposed Lady Fong, "I sent servants with a present of 2 caddies of tea for you, Miss Lin. Was it after all good?" "I had just forgotten all about it," Tai Yu rejoined. "Many thanks for your kind attention." "I tasted it," observed Pao Yu. "I didn't think it anything good, but I don't know how others who've had any of it find it." "Its flavor," said Tai Yu, "is good. The only thing is, it has no color. It's tribute tea from the Laos kingdom. When I tried it, I didn't find it anything very fine either. It's not up to what we ordinarily drink." "To my taste, it's all right," put in Tai Yu. "But what your palates are like, I can't make out." "As you say it's good," suggested Pao Yu, "you're quite at liberty to take all I have for your use." "I've got a great deal more of it over there," Lady Fong remarked. "I'll tell a servant girl to go and fetch it," Tai Yu replied. "No need," Lady Fong went on. "I'll send it with someone. I also have a favor to ask of you tomorrow, so I may as well tell the servant to bring it along at the same time." When Lin Tai Yu heard these words, she put on a smile. "You just mark this," she observed. "I've had today a little tea from her place, and she at once begins making a tool of me." "Since you've had some of our tea," Lady Fong laughed, "how is it that you have not become a wife in our house?" The whole party burst out laughing aloud, so much so that they found it difficult to repress themselves. But Tai Yu's face was suffused with blushes. She turned her head the other way and uttered not a word. "Our sister-in-law Secunda's jives are first class," Pao Chai chimed in with a laugh. "What jives? They're purely and simply the prattle of a mean mouth and vile tongue. They're enough to evoke people's displeasure." Saying this, she went on to sputter in disgust. "Were you," insinuated Lady Fong, "to become a wife in my family, what is there that you would lack?" Pointing then at Pao Yu, she cried, "Look here. Is not this human being worthy of you? Is not his station in life good enough for you? Are not our stock and estate sufficient for you? And in what slight degree can he make you lose caste?" Tai Yu rose to her feet and retired immediately, but Pao Chai shouted, "Here's Pen in a huff. Don't you yet come back? When you've gone, there will really be no fun." While calling out to her, she jumped up to pull her back. As soon as she reached the door of the room, she beheld Madame Chow, accompanied by Mrs. Chu, both coming to look up Pao Yu. Pao Yu and his companions got up in a body and pressed them into a seat. Lady Fong was the only person who did not heed them. But just as Pao Chai was about to open her lips, she perceived a servant girl, attached to Madame Wang's apartments, appear on the scene. "Your maternal uncle's wife has come," she said, "and she requests you, ladies and young ladies, to come out and see her." Li Gong Chai, hurriedly walked away in company with Lady Feng. The two dames, Mrs. Chow and Mrs. Zhao, in like manner took their leave and quitted the room. As for me, I can't go out, Pao Yu shouted, but whatever you do, pray don't ask Aunt to come in here. Cousin Lin, do stay a while. I've got something to tell you. Lady Feng overheard him. Turning her head towards Lin Taiyu, she said, "There's someone who wants to speak to you." And forthwith, laying hold of Lin Taiyu, she pushed her back and then trudged away along with Li Gongche. During this time, Pao Yu clasped Lin Taiyu's hand in his. He did nothing then smile, but not a word did he utter. Taiyu, naturally, therefore, got crimson in the face and struggled to escape his importunities. "Ah, my head is sore," Pao Yu explained. "It should be," Taiyu rejoined. "Oh, Mita Fo." Pao Yu then gave vent to a loud shout. His body bounced 3 or 4 feet high from the ground. His mouth was full of confused shrieks, but all he said was rambling talk. Taiyu and the servant girls were full of consternation, and with all possible haste, they ran and apprised Madame Wang and Dowager Lady Cha. Wang Zutang's wife was also with them at this time, so they all came in a body to see him. Pao Yu behaved more and more as if determined to clutch a sword or seize a spear to put an end to his existence. He raged in a manner sufficient to subvert the heavens and upset the earth. As soon as Dowager Lady Cha and Madame Wang caught sight of him, they were struck with terror. They trembled wildly like a piece of clothing that is being shaken. Uttering a shout of "my son" and another of "my flesh," they burst out into a loud fit of crying. Presently, all the inmates were seized with fright. Even Judge Sa, Madame Heng, Jag Cheng, Jia Zhen, Jia Len, Jia Rong, Zhao Rong's wife, and the mistresses of the household, whether high or low, and the servant girls and married women too, rushed into the garden to see what was up. The confusion that prevailed at the moment was like entangled flax. Everyone was at a loss what to do. When they espied, Lady Feng dashed into the garden, a glistening sword in hand, and tried to cut down everything that came her way, ogle vacantly whomsoever struck her gaze, and make forthwith an attempt to dispatch them. A greater panic than ever broke out among the whole assemblage. But, placing herself at the head of a handful of sturdy female servants, Rui's wife precipitated herself forward, and clasping her tight, they succeeded in snatching the sword from her grip and carrying her back into her room. Pinger, Fenger, and the other girls began to weep. They invoked the heavens and appealed to the earth. Even Jia Cheng was distressed at heart. One and all at this stage started shouting, some one thing, some another. Some suggested exorcists. Some cried out for the posture makers to attract the devils. Others recommended that Chong, the Taoist priest of the Yu Hang Temple, should catch the evil spirits. A thorough turmoil reigned supreme for a long time. The gods were implored, prayers were offered, every kind of remedy was tried, but no benefit whatsoever became visible. After sunset, the spouse of Wang Zutang said goodbye and took her departure. On the ensuing day, Wang Zutang himself also came to make inquiries. Following closely upon him arrived in a body messengers from the young Marquess Shai, Madame Heng's young brother, and their various relatives to ascertain for themselves how Lady Feng and Pao Yu were progressing. Some brought charm water, some recommended bonzens and Taoist priests. Others spoke highly of doctors. But that young fellow and his elder brother's wife fell into such greater and greater stupor that they lost all consciousness. Their bodies were hot like fire. As they lay prostrate on their beds, they talked deliriously. With the fall of the shades of night, their condition aggravated so much that the matrons and servant girls did not venture to volunteer their attendance. They had therefore to be both moved into Madame Wang's quarters, where servants were told to take their turn and watch them. Dowager Lady Cha, Madame Wang, Madame Heng, and Mrs. She did not budge an inch or a step from their side. They sat around them and did nothing then cry. Jia Se and Jia Chang, too, were a prey at this juncture lest weeping would upset Dowager Lady Cha. Day and night, oil was burnt and fires were, mindless of expense, kept alight. The bustle and confusion was such that no one, either master or servant, got any rest. Jia Se also sped on every side in search of Buddhist and Taoist priests, but Jia Chang had witnessed how little relief these things could afford, and he felt constrained to dissuade him from his endeavors. The destiny of our son and daughter is entirely dependent upon the will of heaven, and no human strength can prevail. The malady of these two persons would not be healed even if every kind of treatment was tried, and I feel confident that it is the design of heaven that things should be as they are. All we can do is allow it to carry out its purpose. Jia Se, however, paid no notice to his remonstrances and continued as hitherto to fuss in every imaginable way. In no time, 3 days elapsed. Lady Fang and Pao Yu were still confined to their beds. Their very breaths had grown fainter. The whole household therefore unanimously arrived at the conclusion that there was no hope, and with all dispatch they made every necessary preparations for the subsequent requirements of both their relatives.
Dowager Lady Chia, Madame Wang, Jia Len, Ping Xian, and the others indulged in tears with keener and keener anguish. They hung between life and death. Mrs. Zhao alone was the one who assumed an outward sham air of distress, while in her heart she felt her wishes gratified. The 4th day arrived. At an early hour, Bao Yu suddenly opened his eyes and addressed himself to his grandmother Zhao. From this day forward, he said, "I may no longer abide in your house, so you had better send me off at once." These words made Dowager Lady Zhao feel as if her very heart had been wrenched out of her. Mrs. Zhao, who stood by, exhorted her, "You shouldn't, venerable lady, indulge in excessive grief. This young man has been long ago of no good. So wouldn't it be as well to truss him up and let him go back a moment sooner from this world? You'll also be thus sparing him considerable suffering. But if you persist in not reconciling yourself to the separation, and this breath of his is not cut off, he will lie there and suffer without any respite." Her arguments were scarcely ended when she was spat upon by Dowager Lady Zhao. "You rotten-tongued, good-for-nothing hag! What makes you fancy him of no good? You wish him dead and gone, but what benefit will you then derive? Don't give way to any dreams, for if he does die, I'll just exact your lives from you. It's all because you've been continuously at him, inciting him, and urging him to read and write, that his spirit has become so intimidated that at the sight of his father, he behaves just like a rat trying to get out of the way of a cat. And is not all this the result of the bullying of such a mean herd of women as yourselves? Could you now drive him to death, your wishes would immediately be fulfilled. But which of you will I let off?" Now she shed tears, now she gave vent to abuse. Jia Chang, who stood by, heard these invectives, and they so enhanced his exasperation that he promptly shouted out and made Mrs. Zhao withdraw. He then exerted himself for a time to console her by using kindly accents. But suddenly, someone came to announce that the 2 coffins had been completed. This announcement pierced, like a dagger, Dowager Lady Zhao to the heart. And while weeping with despair more intense, she broke forth in violent upbraidings. "Who is it?" she inquired.
Who gave orders to make the coffins? Bring at once the coffin makers and beat them to death." A stir ensued, sufficient to convulse the heavens and to subvert the earth. But at an unforeseen moment resounded in the air the gentle rapping of a wooden fish bell. A voice recited the sentence, Ave, Buddha able to unravel retribution and dispel grievances. Should any human being lie in sickness and his family be solicitous on his account, or should anyone have met with evil spirits and come across any baleful evils, we have the means to effect a cure. Dowager Lady Zhao and Madame Wang at once directed servants to go out into the street and find out who it was. It turned out to be, in fact, a mangy-headed bonze and a hobbling Taoist priest. What was the appearance of the bonze? His nose like a suspended gall, his 2 eyebrows so long, his eyes resembling radiant stars possessed a precious glow. His coat in tatters and shoes of straw without a home, rolling in filth and a worse fate, his head one mass of boils. And the Taoist priest, what was he like? With one leg perched high he comes, with one leg low, his whole frame drenching wet, bespattered all with mud. If you perchance meet him and ask him where his home, he'll say in fairyland, west of the weak water. Jia Chang ordered the servants to invite them to walk in. He asked the 2 persons, "On what hill do you cultivate the principles of reason?" "Worthy official," the bonze smiled, "you must not ask too many questions. It's because we've learned that there are inmates of your honorable mansion in a poor state of health that we come with the express design of working a cure. There are," explained Jia Chang, "2 of our members who have been possessed of evil spirits. But is there any, I wonder, remedy by means of which they could be healed?" "In your family," laughingly observed the Taoist priest, "you have ready at hand a precious thing, the like of which is rare to find in the world. It possesses the virtue of alleviating the ailment. So why do you need to inquire about remedies?" Jia Chang's mind was forthwith aroused. "It's true," he consequently rejoined, "that my son brought along with him at the time of his birth a piece of jade on the surface of which was inscribed that it had the virtue of dispelling evil influences, but we haven't seen any efficacy in it." "There is, worthy official," said the bonze, "something in it which you do not understand. That precious jade was in its primitive state efficacious, but consequent upon it having been polluted by music, lewdness, property, and gain, it has lost its spiritual properties. But bring now that valuable thing, and wait till I have taken it into my hands and pronounced incantations over it, when it will become as full of efficacy as of old." Jia Chang accordingly unclasped the piece of jade from Pao Yu's neck and handed it to the 2 divines. The Buddhist priest held it with reverence in the palm of his hand and heaving a deep sigh. "Since our parting," he cried, "at the foot of the King Gang Peak, about 13 years have elapsed. How time flies in the mortal world! Thine earthly destiny has not yet been determined. Alas, alas! How admirable were the qualities thou didst possess in those days! By heaven unrestrained, without constraint from earth, no joys lived in thy heart, but sorrows none as well. Yet when perception through refinement thou didst reach, thou wentst among mankind to trouble, to give, to rise. How sad the lot which thou of late hast had to hear! Powder, prints, and rude stains thy precious lustre dim. How spars both day and night encage thee like a duck. Deep wilt thou sleep, but from thy dream at length thou'lt wake. Thy debt of vengeance once discharged, thou wilt depart. At the conclusion of this recital, he again rubbed the stone for a while and vented some nonsensical utterances, after which he surrendered it to Chia Cheng. "This object," he said, "has already resumed its efficacy, but you shouldn't do anything to desecrate it. Hang it on the post of the door in his bedroom, and with the exception of his own relatives, you must not let any outside female pollute it. After the expiry of 33 days, he will, I can guarantee, be all right." Jill Tang then gave orders to present tea, but the two priests had already walked away. He had, however, no alternative but to comply with their injunctions, and Lady Feng and Pao Yu, in point of fact, got better from day to day. Little by little, they returned to their senses and experienced hunger. Dowager Lady Chia and Madame Wang at length felt composed in their minds. All the cousins heard the news outside. Tai Yu, prior to anything else, muttered a prayer to Buddha, while Pao Chai laughed and said not a word. "Sister Pao," inquired Xiao Chun, "what are you laughing for?" "I laugh," replied Pao Kai, "because the thus come Joss has more to do than any human being. He's got to see to the conversion of all mankind, and to take care of the ailments to which all flesh is heir, for he restores every one of them at once to health, and he has as well to control people's marriages so as to bring them about through his aid. And what do you say? Has he ample to do or not? Now, isn't this enough to make one laugh, eh?" Lin Taiyu blushed. "Tch!" she exclaimed, "none of you are good people. Instead of following the example of worthy persons, you try to rival the mean mouth of that hussy." As she uttered these words, she raised the portiere and made her exit. But reader, do you want to know any further circumstances? If so, the next chapter will explain them to you. Chapter 26. On the Fian Bridge, Xiao Hong makes known sentimental matters in ambiguous language. In the Shaoxiang Lodge, Tai Yu gives, while under the effects of the spring lassitude, expression to her secret feelings. After 30 days of careful nursing, Pao Yu, we will now notice, not only got strong and hale in body, but the scars on his face completely healed. So he was able to shift his quarters again into the Garden of Broad Vista. But we will banish this topic, as it does not deserve any additional explanations. Let us now turn our attention elsewhere. During the time that Pao Yu was lately laid up in bed, Chia Yun, along with the young pages of the household, sat up on watch to keep an eye on him, and both day and night they tarried on this side of the mansion. But Xiao Hong, as well as all the other waiting maids, remained in the same part to nurse Pao Yu, so he and she saw a great deal of each other on several occasions, and gradually an intimacy sprung up. Xiao Hong observed that Chia Yun held in his hand a handkerchief, very much like the one she herself had dropped some time ago, and was bent on asking him for it. But she did, on the other hand, not think she could do so with propriety. The unexpected visit of the bonze and Taoist priest rendered, however, superfluous the services of the various male attendants, and Chia Yun had therefore to go again and supersede the men planting the trees. Now she had a mind to drop the whole question, but she could not reconcile herself to it, and now she longed to go and ask him about it, but fears rose in her mind lest people should entertain any suspicions as to the relations that existed between them. But just as she faltered, quite irresolute, and her heart was thoroughly unsettled, she unawares heard someone outside inquire, "Sister, are you in the room or not?" Xiao Hong, upon catching this question, looked out through a hole in the window, and perceiving at a glance that it was no one else but a young servant girl attached to the same court as herself, Xiao Hui by name, she consequently said by way of reply, "Yes, I am. Come in." When these words reached her ear, Xiao Hui ran in and, taking at once a seat on the bed, observed with a smile, "How lucky I've been! I was a little time back in the court washing a few things when Pao Yu cried out that some tea should be sent over to Miss Lin, and Sister Hua handed it to me to go on the errand. By a strange coincidence, our old lady had presented some money to Miss Lin, and she was engaged at the moment in distributing it among their servant girls. So soon as she saw me get there, Miss Lin forthwith grasped 2 handfuls of cash and gave them to me. How many there are, I don't know, but do keep them for me." Speedily, then opening her handkerchief, she emptied the cash. Xiao Hong counted them for her by 5s and 10s at a time. She was beginning to put them away when Xiao Hui remarked, "How are you, after all, feeling in your mind lately? I'll tell you what, you should really go and stay at home for a couple of days. And were you to ask a doctor round and to have a few doses of medicine, you'll get all right at once." "What are you talking about?" Xiao Hong replied. "What shall I go home for when there's neither rhyme nor reason for it? Miss Lin, I remember, is naturally of a weak physique and constantly has to take medicines. So were you to ask her for some and bring them over and take them, it would come to the same thing." "Nonsense," rejoined Xiao Hong. "Are medicines also to be recklessly taken? You can't go on like this forever. You're besides loath to eat and loath to drink, and what will you be like in the long run?"
"What's there to fear?" observed Xiao Hong. "Won't it anyhow be better to die a little earlier? It would be a riddance." "Why do you deliberately come out with all this talk?" Cha Hui demurred. "How could you ever know anything of the secrets of my heart?" Xiao Hong inquired. Cha Hui nodded her head and gave way to reflection. "I don't think it's strange on your part," she said after a time, "for it is really difficult to abide in this place. Yesterday, for instance, our dowager lady remarked that the servants in attendance had, during all the days that Pao Yu was ill, had a good deal to put up with, and that now that he has recovered, incense should be burned everywhere and the vows fulfilled. And she expressed a wish that those in his service should, one and all, be rewarded according to their grade. I and several others can be safely looked upon as young in years and unworthy to presume so high, so I don't feel in any way aggrieved. But how is it that one like you couldn't be included in the number? My heart is much annoyed at it. Had there been any fear that Shi Yin would have gotten 10 times more, I could not have even then felt sore against her, for she really deserves it. I'll just tell you an honest truth. Who else is there like her? Not to speak of the diligence and carefulness that she has displayed all along. Even had she not been so diligent and careful, she couldn't have been set aside. But what is provoking is that lot, like Qing Yan and Qi Sha, should have been included in the upper class. Yet it's because everyone places such reliance on the fine reputation of their father and mother that they exalt them. Now do tell me,
Is this sufficient to anger one or not? It won't do to be angry with them, Xiao Hong observed. The proverb says, you may erect a shed 1,000 lilong, but there is no entertainment from which the guests will not depart. And who is it that will tarry here for a whole lifetime? In another 3 years or 5 years, every single one of us will have gone her own way. And who will, when that time comes, worry her mind about anyone else? These allusions had the unexpected effect of touching Cha Hui to the heart. And in spite of herself, the very balls of her eyes got red. But so uneasy did she feel for crying for no reason that she had to exert herself to force a smile. What you say is true, she ventured. And yet Pao Yu even yesterday explained how the rooms should be arranged by and by, and how the clothes should be made, just as if he was bound to hang on to dear life for several hundreds of years. Xiao Hong, at these words, gave a couple of sardonic smiles. But when about to pass some remark, she perceived a youthful servant girl who had not as yet let her hair grow walk in, holding in her hands several patterns in 2 sheets of paper. You are asked to trace these 2 designs, she said. As she spoke, she threw them at Xiao Hong, and twisting herself around, she immediately scampered away. Whose are they, after all? Xiao Hong inquired, addressing herself outside. Couldn't you wait even so much as to conclude what you had to say, but flew off at once? Who is steaming bread and waiting for you? Or are you afraid, forsooth, that it should get cold? They belong to Sister Qi. The young servant girl merely returned for an answer from outside the window, and raising her feet high, she ran tramp on her way back again. Xiao Hong lost control over her temper, and snatching the designs, she flung them on one side. She then rummaged in a drawer for a pencil, but finding, after a prolonged search, that they were all blunt, she thereupon ejaculated, "Where did I, the other day, put that brand new pencil? How is it I can't remember where it is?" While she soliloquized, she became wrapped in thought. After some reflection, she at length gave a smile. "Of course," she exclaimed, "the other evening Ying took it away." And turning towards Cha Hui, she shouted, "Fetch it for me." "Sister Hua is waiting for me to get a box for her, so you'd better go for it yourself," Cha Hui rejoined. "What? She's waiting for you, and are you still squatting here chatting leisurely? Hadn't it been that I asked you to go fetch it, she too wouldn't have been waiting for you, you most perverse vixen." With these words on her lips, she herself walked out of the room, and leaving the Aiheng court, she straightway proceeded in the direction of Bao Chai's court. As soon, however, as she reached the Sinfeng pavilion, she saw Dame Li, Pao Yu's nurse, appear in view from the opposite side. So Xiao Hong halted, and putting on a smile, she asked, "Dame Li, where are you old lady bound for? How is it that you're coming this way?" Nurse Li stopped and clapped her hands. "Tell me, has he deliberately gone and fallen in love with that Mr. Something like Yoon or you? They now insist on me bringing him inside. But if they get wind of it by and by in the upper rooms, it won't again be a nice thing. Are you, old lady, taking things in such real earnest that you readily believe them and want to go and ask him in here?" Xiao Hong replied, smiling. "What can I do?" Nurse Li rejoined. "Why, that fellow will, if he has any idea of decency, do the right thing and not come in. Besides, he's not a fool," pleaded Nurse Li. "So why shouldn't he come in?"
"Well, if he is to come," answered Haoxing, "it will devolve upon you, worthy dame, to lead him along with you, for were you by and by to let him penetrate inside all alone and knock recklessly about, why, it won't do at all." "Have I got all that leisure," retorted Nurse Li, "to trudge along with him? I'll simply tell him to come, and later on I can dispatch a young servant girl or some old woman to bring him in and have done." Saying this, she continued her way leaning on her staff. After listening to her rejoinder, Hao Xing stood still, and plunging in abstraction, she did not go and fetch the pencil. But presently she caught sight of a servant girl running that way. Espying Hao Xing lingering in that spot, "Sister Heng," she cried, "what are you doing in here?" Hao Xing raised her head and recognized a young waiting maid called Tuir. "Where are you off to?" Hao Xing asked. "I've been told to bring in Master Secundus, Mr. Yun." Tuir replied, after which answer she there and then departed with all speed. Hao Xing reached, meanwhile, the Feng Yao Bridge. As soon as she approached the gateway, she perceived Tuir coming along with Chai Yun from the opposite direction. While advancing, Chai Yun ogled Hao Xing, and Hao Xing, too, though pretending to be addressing herself to Tuir, cast a glance at Chai Yun, and their four eyes, as luck would have it, met. Hao Xing involuntarily blushed all over, and turning herself round, she walked off towards the Hangwu court. But we will leave her there without further remarks. During this time, Chai Yun followed Tuir by a circuitous way into the Aiheng court. Tuir entered first and made the necessary announcement. Then, subsequently, she ushered in Chai Yun. When Chai Yun scrutinized the surroundings, he perceived here and there in the court a few blocks of rockery, among which were planted banana trees. On the opposite side were two storks preening their feathers under the fir trees. Under the covered passage were suspended in a row cages of every description, containing all sorts of fairy-like rare birds. In the upper part were 5 diminutive anterooms, uniformly carved with unique designs, and above the framework of the door was hung a tablet with the inscription in 4 huge characters: "I Hung, Kwai Lu, the Happy Red and Joyful Green." I thought it was strange that it should be called the Aiheng Court, but are these in fact the 4 characters inscribed on the tablet? But while he was communing within himself, he heard someone laugh and then exclaim from the inner side of the gauze window, "Come in at once! How is it that I've forgotten you these 2 or 3 months?" As soon as Chai Yun recognized Bao Yu's voice, he entered the room with hurried step. On raising his head, his eye was attracted by the brilliant splendor emitted by gold and jade and by the dazzling luster of the elegant arrangements. He failed to detect where Bao Yu was ensconced. The moment he turned his head around, he espied on the left side a large cheval glass, behind which appeared to view, standing side by side, 2 servant girls of 15 or 16 years of age. "Master Secundus, please take a seat in the inner room," they ventured. Chai Yun could not even muster courage to look at them straight in the face, but promptly assenting, he walked into a green gauze mosquito house, where he saw a small lacquered bed hung with curtains of a deep red color, with clusters of flowers embroidered in gold. Bao Yu, wearing a house dress and slipshod shoes, was reclining on the bed, a book in hand. The moment he perceived Chai Yun walk in, he discarded his book and forthwith smiled and raised himself up. Chai Yun hurriedly pressed forward and paid his salutation. Bao Yu then offered him a seat, but he simply chose a chair in the lower part of the apartment. "Ever since the moon in which I came across you and told you to come into the library, I've had, who would have thought it, endless things to continuously attend to, so that I forgot about you." "It's I indeed who lacked good fortune," rejoined Chai Yun with a laugh, "particularly so as it again happened that you, uncle, fell ill. But are you quite right once more?" "All right," answered Bao Yu. "I heard that you've been put to much trouble and inconvenience on a good number of days." "Had I had any trouble to bear, it would have been my duty to bear it. But your complete recovery, uncle, is really a blessing to our whole family." As he spoke, he discerned a couple of servant maids come to help him to a cup of tea. But while conversing with Bao Yu, Chai-yan was intent on scrutinizing the girl with slim figure and oval face, and clad in a silvery red jacket, a blue satin vest, and a white silk petticoat with narrow pleats. At the time of Bao Yu's illness, Chai-yan had spent a couple of days in the inner apartments, so that he remembered half of the inmates of note. And the moment he set eyes on this servant girl, he knew that it was Hee-sing, and that she was in Bao Yu's rooms on a different standing to the rest. So now that she brought the tea in herself, and that Bao Yu was besides sitting by, he rose to his feet with alacrity, and put on a smile. "Sister, how is it that you're pouring tea for me? I came here to pay uncle a visit. What's more, I'm no stranger, so let me pour it with my own hands." "Just you sit down and finish," Bao Yu interposed. "Will you also behave in this fashion with servant girls?"
"In spite of what you say," remarked Chia-yun, smiling, "they are young ladies attached to your rooms, uncle, and how could I presume to be disorderly in my conduct?" So saying, he took a seat and drank his tea. Bao Yu then talked to him about trivial and irrelevant matters, and afterwards went on to tell him in whose household the actresses were best, and whose gardens were pretty. He further mentioned to him in whose quarters the servant girls were handsome, whose banquets were sumptuous, as well as in whose home were to be found strange things, and what family possessed remarkable objects. Jia-yun was constrained to humor him in his conversation, but after a chat which lasted for some time, he noticed that Bao Yu was somewhat listless, and he promptly stood up and took his leave. And Bao Yu, too, did not use much pressure to detain him. "Tomorrow, if you have nothing to do come over," he merely observed, after which he again bade the young waiting maid, Juyer, see him out. Having left the I-hung court, Jia-yun cast a glance all around, and realizing that there was no one about, he slackened his pace at once, and while proceeding leisurely, he conversed in a friendly way with Juyer on one thing or another. First and foremost, he inquired of her what was her age and her name. "Of what standing are your father and mother?" he said. "How many years have you been in Uncle Pao's apartments? How much money do you get a month? In all, how many girls are there in Uncle Pao's rooms?" As Juyer heard the question set to her, she readily made suitable answer to each. "The one who was a while back talking to you is called Sha Hung, isn't it?" continued Jia-yun. "Yes, her name is Xiao Hung," replied Juyer, smiling. "But why do you ask about her?" "I inquired of you just now about some handkerchief or other. Well, I've picked one up." Juyer greeted this response with a smile. "Many are the times that she has asked me whether I had seen her handkerchief, but have I got all that leisure to worry my mind about such things? She spoke to me about it again today, and she suggested that I should find it for her and that she would also recompense me. She told me this when we were just now at the entrance of the Hangwu port, and you too, Mr. Secundus, overheard her, so that I'm not lying. But dear Mr. Secundus, since you've picked it up, give it to me, do, and I'll see what she will give me as a reward." The truth is that Jia-yun had, the previous moon when he had come into the garden to attend to the planting of trees, picked up a handkerchief which he conjectured must have been dropped by some inmate of those grounds,
but as he was not aware of whose it was, he did not consequently presume to act with indiscretion. But on this occasion, he overheard Xiao Heng make inquiries of Julier on the subject, and concluding that it must belong to her, he felt immeasurably delighted. Seeing besides how importunate Julier was, he had once devised a plan within himself, and vehemently producing from his sleeve a handkerchief of his own, he observed, as he turned towards Julier with a smile, "As for giving it to you, I'll do so, but in the event that you obtain any present from her, you mustn't impose on me." Julier assented to his proposal most profusely, and taking the handkerchief, she saw Jia Yun out, and then came back in search of Xiao Heng, but we will leave her there for the present. We will now return to Pao Yu. After dismissing Jia Yun, he lay in such complete listlessness on the bed that he betrayed every sign of being half asleep. Xing Yin walked up to him and seated herself on the edge of the bed, and pushing him, she said, "What are you about to go to sleep again? Would it not do your languid spirits good if you went out for a bit of a stroll?" Upon hearing her voice, Pao Yu grasped her hand. "I would like to go out, but I can't reconcile myself to the separation from you." He smiled. "Get up at once," Xing Yin laughed, and as she uttered these words, she pulled Pao Yu up. "Where can I go?" explained Pao Yu. "I'm quite surfeited with everything. Once out, you'll be all right, but if you simply give way to this language, you'll be more than ever sick of everything at heart." Pao Yu could not do anything otherwise, dull and out of sorts though he was, than accede to his importunities. Strolling leisurely out of the door of the room, he amused himself a little with the birds suspended under the veranda. Then he wended his steps outside the court and followed the course of the Hengfeng stream. But after admiring the golden fish for a time, he espied on the opposite hillock 2 young deer come rushing down swift as an arrow. What they were up to Pao Yu could not discern, but while abandoning himself to melancholy, he caught sight of Jia Lan following behind him with a small bow in his hand and hurrying downhill in pursuit of them. As soon as he realized that Pao Yu stood ahead of him, he speedily halted. "Uncle Secundus, are you at home? I imagined you had gone out of doors." "You are up to mischief again, eh?" Pao Yu rejoined. "They've done nothing to you, and why shoot at them with your arrows?" "I had no studies to attend to just now, so being free with nothing to do, I was practicing riding and archery." "Shut up!" exclaimed Pao Yu. "When are you not engaged in practicing?"
Saying this, he continued his way and straightway reached the entrance of a court. Here the bamboo foliage was thick and the breeze sighed gently. This was the Hio Xiong Lodge. Pao Yu listlessly rambled in. He saw a bamboo portiere hanging down to the ground. Stillness prevailed. Not a human voice fell on the ear. He advanced as far as the window. Noticing that a whiff of subtle scent stole softly through the green gauze casement, Pao Yu applied his face closely against the frame to peep in. But suddenly he caught the faint sound of a deep sigh and the words, "Day after day my feelings slumbered drowsily." Upon overhearing this exclamation, Pao Yu unconsciously began to feel a prey to inward longings. But, casting a second glance, he saw Dai Yu stretching herself on the bed. "Why is it," smiled Pao Yu from outside the window, "that your feelings day after day slumber drowsily?" So saying, he raised the portiere and stepped in. The consciousness that she had not been reticent about her feelings made Dayu unwittingly flush scarlet. Taking hold of her sleeve, she screened her face and turning her body round towards the inside, she pretended to be fast asleep. Pao Yu drew near her. He was about to pull her round when he saw Dayu's nurse enter the apartment, followed by 2 matrons. "Is Miss asleep?" they said. "If so, we'll ask her over when she wakes." As these words were being spoken, Dayu eagerly twisted herself round and sat up. "Who's asleep?" she laughed. "We thought you were fast asleep, miss," smiled the 2 or 3 matrons as soon as they perceived Dayu get up. This greeting over, they called Churjin. "Your young mistress has awoken. Come in and wait on her." While calling her, they quitted the room in a body. Dayu remained seated on the bed. Raising her arms, she adjusted her hair, and smilingly she observed to Pao Yu, "What do you walk in for when people are asleep?" At the sight of her half-closed star-like eyes and of her fragrant cheeks suffused with a crimson blush, Pao Yu's feelings were of a sudden awakened, so he, bending his body, took a seat on a chair and asked with a smile, "What were you saying a short while ago?" "I wasn't saying anything," Dayu replied. "What a lie you're trying to ram down my throat," laughed Pao Yu. "I heard all." But in the middle of their colloquium, they saw Churjin enter. Pao Yu then put on a smiling face. "Churjin," he cried, "pour me a cup of your good tea." "Where's the good tea to be had?" Churjin answered. "If you want good tea, you'd better wait until He-Sin comes." "Don't heed him," interposed Dayu. "Just go first and draw me some water." "He's a visitor," remonstrated Churjin, "and of course I should first pour him a cup of tea and then go and draw the water." With this answer, she started to serve the tea. "My dear girl," he exclaimed laughingly, "if I could only share the same bridal curtain with your lovable young mistress, would I ever be able to treat you as a servant by making you fold the covers and make the beds?" Lin Dayu at once drooped her head. "What are you saying?" she remonstrated. "What? Did I say anything?" smiled Pao Yu. Dayu burst into tears. "You've recently got into a new way. Whatever slang you happen to hear outside, you come and tell me. And whenever you read any improper book, you poke your fun at me. What? Have I become a laughingstock for gentlemen?" As she began to cry, she jumped down from the bed and promptly left the room. Pao Yu was at a loss how to act. So agitated was he that he hastily ran up to her. "My dear cousin," he pleaded, "I do deserve death, but don't go and tell anyone. If I again venture to utter such kind of language, may blisters grow on my mouth and may my tongue waste away." But while appealing to her feelings, he saw He-Sin approach him. "Go back at once and put on your clothes, as master wants to see you." At the very mention of his father, Pao Yu suddenly felt as if struck by lightning. Regardless of anything and everything, he rushed as fast as possible back to his room, and changing his clothes, he came out into the garden. Here he discovered Pei Ming standing at the second gateway waiting for him. "Do you perchance know what he wants me for?" he inquired. "Master, hurry out at once. You must of course go and see him. When you get there, you are sure to find out what it's all about." This said, he urged Pao Yu on, and together they turned past the large pavilion. Pao Yu was, however, still laboring under suspicion when he heard from the corner of the wall a loud outburst of laughter. Upon turning his head around, he caught sight of Shui Pen jump out, clapping his hands. "Hadn't I said that my uncle wanted you?" he laughed. "Would you ever have rushed out with such alacrity?"
Pei Ming also laughed and fell on his knees, but Pao Yu remained for a long time under the spell of utter astonishment before he at length realized that it was Shui Puan who had inveigled him to come out. Shui Puan hastily made a salutation and a curtsy and confessed his fault. He next gave way to entreaties, saying, "Don't punish the young servant, for it is simply I who begged him to go." Pao Yu too had then no other alternative but to smile. "I don't mind you playing your larks on me, but why did you mention my father?" he inquired. "Were I to go and tell my aunt, your mother, to see the rights and the wrongs of the case, how would you like it?"
"My dear cousin," remarked Xiu Pan vehemently, "the primary idea I had in view was to ask you to come out a moment sooner, and I forgot to respectfully shun the expression. But by and by, when you wish to chaff me, just you likewise allude to my father, and we'll thus be square." "Aya!" exclaimed Pao Yu, "you do more than ever deserve death." Then turning again towards Pei Ming, "You ruffian, what are you still kneeling for?" Pei Ming began to bump his head on the ground with vehemence. Had it been for anything else, Xiu Pan chimed in, "I wouldn't have made bold to disturb you, but it's simply in connection with my birthday, which is tomorrow, the 3rd day of the 5th moon. Cheng Yurahing, who is in that curio shop of ours, unexpectedly brought along, goodness knows where he fished them from, fresh lotus so thick and so long, so mealy and so crisp, melons of this size, and a Siamese porpoise that long and that big, smoked with cedar, such as is sent as tribute from the kingdom of Siam. Are not these 4 presents, pray, rare delicacies? The porpoise is not only expensive, but difficult to get, and that kind of lotus and melon must have cost him no end of trouble to grow. I lost no time in presenting some to my mother, and at once sent some to your old grandmother and my aunt. But a good many of them still remain now, and were I to eat them all alone, it would be, I fear, more than I deserve. So I concluded, after thinking right and left, that there was, besides myself, only you good enough to partake of some. That is why I specially invite you to taste them. But as luck would have it, a young singing boy has also come. So what do you say to you and I having a jolly day of it?" As they talked, they walked, and as they walked, they reached the interior of the library. Here they discovered a whole assemblage consisting of Tan Guang, Cheng Yuehing, Hu Yi Lai, Tan Tingren, and others, and the singing boy as well. As soon as these saw Pao Yu walk in, some paid their respects to him, others inquired how he was, and after the interchange of salutations, tea was drunk. Xiu Pan then gave orders to serve the wine. Scarcely were the words out of his mouth than the servant lads bustled and fussed for a long while, laying the table. When at last the necessary arrangements had been completed, the company took their seats. Pao Yu verily found the melons and lotus of an exceptional description. "My birthday presents have not yet been sent round," he felt impelled to say, a smile on his lips. "Just so," retorted Xiu Pan. "But when you come tomorrow to congratulate me, we'll consider what novel kind of present you can give me." "I've got nothing that I can give you," rejoined Pao Yu. "As far as money, clothes, eatables, and other such articles go, they are not really mine. All I can call my own are such pages of characters that I may write or pictures that I may draw." "Your reference to pictures reminds me of a book I saw yesterday containing immodest drawings. They were truly beautifully done. On the front page figured also a whole lot of characters, but I didn't carefully look at them. I simply noticed the name of the person who had executed them. It was in fact something or other like Gang Huang. The pictures were actually exceedingly good."
This illusion made Pao Yu exercise his mind with innumerable conjectures. Of pictures drawn from past years to the present, I have seen a good many, but I've never come across any Gang Huang. After considerable thought, he could not repress himself from bursting out laughing. Then, asking a servant to fetch him a pencil, he wrote a couple of words on the palm of his hand. This done, he went on to inquire of Siopan, "Did you see correctly that it read Gang Huang?" "How could I not have seen correctly?" ejaculated Siopan. Pao Yu thereupon unclenched his hand and allowed him to peruse what was written in it. Were they possibly these two characters? These are, in point of fact, not very dissimilar from what Gang Huang looked like. On scrutinizing them, the company noticed the two words Tong Yin, and they all laughed. They must, we fancy, have been these two characters. Your eyes, sir, may, there's no saying, have suddenly grown dim. Siopan felt utterly ashamed. He came, however, a young page announced that Mr. Fang had arrived. Pao Yu concluded that the newcomer must be Fang Tsi-yung, the son of Fang Tang, general with the prefix of Shen-o. "Ask him in at once," Siopan and his companions shouted with one voice. But barely were the words out of their mouths than they realized that Fang Tsi-yung had already stepped in, talking and laughing as he approached. The company speedily rose from table and offered him a seat. "That's right," smiled Fang Tsi-yung. "You don't go outdoors but remain at home and go into high fun." Both Pao Yu and Siopan put on a smile. "We haven't seen you forever long. Is your venerable father strong and hale?"
"My father," rejoined Xiu Ying, "is, thanks to you, strong and hale. But my mother recently contracted a sudden chill and has been unwell for a couple of days." Siopan discerned on his face a slight bluish wound. "With whom have you again been boxing?" he laughingly inquired, "that you've hung up this signboard?" "Since the occasion," laughed Feng Tiyu, "on which I wounded Lieutenant Colonel Chu's son, I've borne the lesson in mind and never lost my temper. So how is it you say that I've again been boxing? This thing on my face was caused when I was out shooting the other day on the Tiewang Hills by a flap from the wing of the falcon." "When was that?" asked Bao Yu. "I started," explained Tu Ying, "on the 28th of the third moon and came back only the day before yesterday." "It isn't to be wondered at then," observed Bao Yu, "that when I went the other day on the 3rd and 4th to a banquet at friend Shen's house, I didn't see you there. Yet I meant to have inquired about you, but I don't know how it slipped from my memory. Did you go alone, or did your venerable father accompany you?" "Of course my father went, so I had no help but to go. For is it likely, forsooth, that I've gone mad from lack of anything to do? Don't we derive enough pleasure from our wine bouts and plays that I should go in quest of such kind of fatiguing recreation? But in this instance, a great piece of fortune turned up in evil fortune." Siopan and his companions noticed that he had finished his tea. "Come along," they all in one proposed, "and join the banquet. You can then quietly recount to us all your experiences." At this suggestion, Fang Tiyu there and then rose to his feet. "According to etiquette," he said, "I should join you in drinking a few cups, but today I still have a very urgent matter to see my father about on my return, so that I truly cannot accept your invitation." Zupan, Pao Yu, and the other young fellows would on no account listen to his excuses. They pulled him vigorously about and would not let him go. "This is indeed strange," laughed Feng Tiyu. "When have you and I had, during all these years, to have recourse to such proceedings? I really am unable to comply with your wishes. But if you do insist on making me have a drink, well then bring a large cup, and I'll take 2 cups full and finish." After this rejoinder, the party could not but give in. Zupan took hold of the kettle, while Pao Yu grasped the cup, and they poured 2 large cups full. Feng Tiyu stood up and quaffed them with one draught.
But do, after all, urged Bao Yu, finish this thing about a piece of good fortune in the midst of misfortune before you go. To tell you this today will be no great fun, smiled Feng Tiyu. But for this purpose, I intend standing a special entertainment and inviting you all to come and have a long chat. And in the second place, I've also got a favor to ask of you. Saying this, he pushed his way and was going off at once when Shu Pan interposed. What you've said has put us more than ever on pins and needles. We cannot brook any delay. Who knows when you will ask us round? So better tell us and thus avoid keeping people in suspense. The latest in 10 days, the earliest in 8. With this answer, he went out of the door, mounted his horse, and took his departure. The party resumed their seats at table. They had another bout and then eventually dispersed. Pao Yu returned into the garden in time to find Shi Rin thinking with solicitude that he had gone to see Jia Zhang and wondering whether it forebode good or evil. As soon as he perceived Pao Yu come back in a drunken state, she felt urged to inquire the reason of everything. Pao Yu told her one by one the particulars of what happened. People, added Jiren, wait for you with lacerated heart and anxious mind, and you go and make merry, yet you could very well, after all, have sent someone with a message. Didn't I propose to send a message? Of course I did, but I failed to do so as on the arrival of friend Feng, I got so mixed up that the intention vanished entirely from my mind. While excusing himself, he saw Pao Kai enter the apartment. Have you tasted any of our new things? She asked, a smile curling her lips. Cousin, laughed Pao Yu, you must have certainly tasted what you've got in your house long before us. Pao Kai shook her head and smiled. Yesterday, she said, my brother did actually make it a point to ask me to have some, but I had none. I told him to keep them and send them to others. So confident I am that with my mean lot and scanty blessings, I little deserve to touch such dainties. As she spoke, a servant girl poured her a cup of tea and brought it to her. While she sipped it, she carried on a conversation on irrelevant matters, which we need not notice, but turn our attention to Lin Taiyu.